Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving deep into the world of product market fit.
Yeah, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how one founder took his dorm room project and turned it into a company that sold for, get this, $365 million.
Seriously. And he did it by learning some pretty counterintuitive things along the way, like maybe ignoring your competitors is a good thing.
It's true. And get this, we'll hear him relive the agony of watching someone use his product for the very first time. Spoiler alert, it wasn't pretty.
Oh man, I can only imagine. But those early struggles are what make this story so valuable for anyone building something new.
Absolutely. And to guide us through this deep dive, we're tapping into the wisdom of David Rusenko,
The founder of Weebly.
the man himself. He's been there, done that, and got the massive payday to prove it.
Okay, so picture this. It's 2006, back when flip phones were still a thing.
Huh. And a young David Rusenko is holed up in his dorm room at Penn State, writing the very first lines of code for what would become Weebly.
A true dorm room legend.
Yeah.
Except, here's the thing. He didn't launch right away.
No, he spent months coding, tweaking, obsessing.
All with 0 users.
Well, almost zero. He said on a good day, they might have had a dozen people poking around.
Probably just his mom trying to figure out what he was up to.
Right. But that's the thing about those early days. It's a grind. It took them 18 months to really find their footing. That's a year and a half of coding, launching, getting crickets.
And it's such a contrast to those overnight success stories you always hear about, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, they did have those moments of almost famous, right? Like they got into Y Combinator almost by accident from what I've heard. And suddenly sites like TechCrunch are writing about them.
Instant credibility.
Right. Then Time Magazine featured them and Newsweek. Each time it was this huge spike of attention.
And then
Crickets again.
because they hadn't found it yet.
That product market fit?
Exactly. And this is where Ruseiko drops one of his most powerful insights. Finding product market fit is the single hardest thing a startup faces.
Even harder than making money.
Harder. He says it makes every other challenge pale in comparison.
Which honestly sounds kind of crazy at first.
Right.
But when you really think about it, it makes sense. You can have the best marketing, a beautiful website, but if your product doesn't solve a real problem,
If people don't actually want what you're selling.
it's all for nothing.
And Rusenko actually has this brilliant twist on that famous Y Combinator mantra. Make something people want.
He tweaks it.
Make something a lot of people want.
Yep.
It's not about finding a niche. It's about building something with real market potential.
I love that. And he talks about how the whole company journey is really a series of stages. You've got that initial spark of an idea,
Then you're prototyping, launching, trying to gain traction.
figuring out how to make money, and then eventually scaling for growth.
And here's the kicker. Rusenko believes that finding product market fit isn't a one-time thing.
Oh, interesting.
It's an ongoing process, even as you scale, because your customers are always evolving, their needs are changing.
So you constantly have to be adapting.
Yes.
And one of the reasons this whole product market fit thing is so tricky is you're essentially trying to solve a problem people may not even realize they have yet,
Right. It's like you're trying to sell someone a solution to a problem they don't even know they have.
which sounds impossible.
It can feel that way. In fact, Rusenko tells this great story about pitching Weebly to 1,000 people.
1,000.
1,000. And you know what they told him?
What?
Stupidest idea ever.
Ouch. I mean, talk about a blow to the ego.
Right. But it's a good reminder that sometimes the most brilliant ideas are the ones that seem the craziest at first.
And it's like, if the solution was obvious.
No one would be doing it already.
Exactly. And that's where that whole build it and they will come mentality can really trip you up.
I told her.
Rusenko definitely learned that the hard way.
Yeah, you gotta get your hands dirty early on.
Exactly. Rapid prototyping user testing. That's where it's at, especially in those early stages.
It's like baking a cake, but you're not tasting the batter as you go.
Yeah.
You can spend all this time frosting this elaborate masterpiece, only to find out the cake itself is like dry and crumbly.
And nobody wants that.
Nobody. So this is where prototyping comes in. It lets you test those assumptions quickly and without breaking the bank.
It's not about perfection at this point, right?
It's about getting something functional in front of your users as quickly as possible.
Whether it's a rough mock-up or some basic code, just something tangible.
Exactly. And it also means resisting that urge, which I know is so tempting to scale too quickly.
Oh, I can only imagine.
We get a little bit of traction and you're like, time to conquer the world.
But Rusenko warns against that. He says premature scaling can be a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah. It's about focusing on the right things at the right time.
And in the early days, that means
Validating your product trumps everything else. Don't worry about building the infrastructure for 1 million users when you don't even have 1,000 yet.
focus on the foundation first.
Exactly. Build that solid base.
Speaking of validation, Rusenko actually lays out a pretty clear process for finding that product market fit.
It's surprisingly practical when you think about how fuzzy this whole concept can seem.
Right. So he starts with really understanding your customer,
Talking to them.
figuring out their pain points. And this is key, really listening to their problems, not their proposed solutions.
Because they're not the experts on the solution. You are, or at least you're becoming the expert.
Right. They're the experts on their own experiences, their own frustrations.
Exactly. So you put on your detective hat and you try to uncover those underlying needs that they might not even be aware of.
Okay, so you've listened, you've got some insights. What's next?
Rapid prototyping time.
Yeah.
You got to test your solution, see what sticks, and be ready to iterate like crazy.
How many iterations are we talking here?
Rosenko says, whatever number you have in your head, multiply it by 10.
Wow. Okay, so buckle up.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, and you're going to be wrong a lot along the way.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's part of the process.
Failure is just a stepping stone.
Exactly. It's all about how you learn from those failures and adapt.
So you got to have a team that can handle those pivots, those quick changes in direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need people who are adaptable, who thrive in uncertainty, and aren't afraid to course correct.
Now, this is where things get super interesting to me. Rusenko is a huge proponent of user testing.
Oh, yeah. It's such a simple concept,
Right.
but it can be brutal to actually do.
So describe this process for me. What does it actually look like?
Okay, so you get someone to use your product, whatever it is, an app, a website, whatever, and you just watch.
Just watch.
Just watch. No interfering, no explaining, no matter how much they're struggling.
Oh, man, that sounds excruciating, like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
It can be, but it's also incredibly illuminating.
Because you see those moments of friction, those points where people get stuck.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is, Rusenko says you only need to do a handful of these testing sessions to uncover like 80% of the UX flaws in your product.
Really? Just
Yeah.
3 to 5 people.
Yep, he tells this great story about Weebly's sign-up form.
Ooh, tell me more.
Okay, so they're about to launch this new homepage, and they want to make signing up as frictionless as possible, right? So they strip it down to just 2 fields, email and password.
Seems simple enough.
Right. I mean, what could go wrong? Well, they get these people to test it out,
Right.
and nobody can figure out how to sign up.
No way. How?
It turns out because there were only those 2 fields, people were interpreting it as a login form, not a sign-up form.
Oh, wow. They were oversimplifying it.
Exactly. And it just goes to show even the smallest details can make a huge difference.
They ended up having to add a 3rd field,
Yeah.
just a simple your name field.
And suddenly people understood what to do.
It's amazing how our brains work, right?
Totally. We make these assumptions based on our past experiences. And if your design doesn't align with those expectations, it can create all sorts of confusion.
So user testing isn't just about catching bugs. It's about understanding how real people actually interact with your product.
Exactly. Which might be totally different from how you envisioned it.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about launching. We've all heard the term minimum viable product,
The MVP. It's everywhere these days.
but Rusenko actually has an interesting take on it. He says he doesn't like the word viable.
Really? Why not?
He says it implies you're just putting out the bare minimum, something that's just good enough not to sink.
I see his point.
He prefers the term minimum remarkable product.
How I like that. It's about standing out even in those early stages.
Exactly.
Mm.
He quotes Paul Buchheit, the creator of Gmail.
Oh, yeah. What do you say?
Launch when your product is better than what's out there.
Love it. So it's not just about being different, it's about being better.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where you've validated your idea, you're confident in its value, and you're ready to share it with the world.
And you're proud of it.
Exactly.
Because that passion, that belief in what you're building, it's contagious.
People can sense that.
They can feel it.
Yep.
And it shows in their interactions with your product.
Now let's talk prioritization, because especially in those early stages, you're constantly juggling a million things at once.
Tell me about it.
But Rusenko makes this great point. There's really only one thing that truly matters at any given time.
And that is
Whatever gets you to the next stage of your company's journey.
laser focus.
It's so easy to get distracted, right? Conferences, awards, press coverage, it's all very shiny and exciting.
Oh, yeah. But none of it matters if you haven't nailed the fundamentals.
Which is why prioritization is so crucial.
Absolutely. And Ruzenko actually shares this amazing prioritization strategy he learned from AstroTeller, the head of Google X.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So you know how most people prioritize? They list out all their tasks, and then they rank them by difficulty and potential payoff.
Right, the classic cost-benefit analysis.
Exactly. But Teller suggests a different approach, especially when you're aiming for what he calls discontinuous improvement.
Okay, so what's that?
It's not about making those incremental improvements. It's about aiming for those big leaps forward.
The game changers.
Exactly. So instead of optimizing for efficiency, you optimize for learning.
Interesting. So how do you actually do that?
You ask yourself, what's the one thing I need to know right now that could change everything?
That's where you focus your energy.
Exactly. It's about tackling those big unknowns, those assumptions that could make or break your product.
Okay, so you're iterating, testing, learning. But how do you actually know when you've hit that sweet spot, when you've achieved product market fit?
Ah, the million-dollar question. You know, Rusenko's big on ignoring the vanity metrics.
The signups, the downloads, all those flashy numbers.
Exactly. They can be so misleading, right?
Right.
You get that initial rush, think you struck gold, but
That's fool's gold.
often, yeah. Rusenko focuses on metrics that show real engagement, real stickiness.
Yeah.
He wants to see that people are using your product and coming back for more.
Okay, so give us the inside scoop. What are these golden metrics?
Well, the first one's deceptively simple. Returning usage. Are people actually using your product, integrating it into their routines?
Yeah, it's just a one-time thing.
Right. Consistent engagement is a strong signal that you're providing real value. The second one is Net Promoter Score, or NPS.
The would you recommend this to a friend question.
That's the one. Simple but powerful. It tells you a lot about customer loyalty, word-of-mouth potential.
Because happy customers are your best marketers.
Absolutely. And finally, for businesses with a subscription model, Rusenko looks at paying customer renewal rates.
It's not just about acquiring customers, it's about keeping them.
Exactly. Retention is key. And he has this great tip. When you're analyzing churn, don't just look at the overall numbers.
Okay, so dig into that a bit more. What does he suggest?
Focus on cohort-based renewal rates. So you group customers by when they signed up and track how they renew over time. Gives you a much clearer picture of whether your product improvements are actually translating to long-term value.
So you've launched, the metrics are looking good, things seem to be clicking. What does it actually feel like when you've achieved product market fit?
Rusenko describes it as this almost tangible shift. Suddenly things just feel easier.
Instead of pushing that boulder uphill,
You're riding the wave. You feel like a genius. Every decision you make is golden. Sales are
it
effortless.
just flows.
Exactly. Now, that feeling might fade as you scale and hit new challenges, but in that moment, it's pure magic. You've tapped into something real. He also talks about the importance of building a strong brand, but he cautions against overthinking it in the early stages. He believes the best brands emerge organically from that deep understanding of a customer need.
He gives that great example of Virgin America.
Oh, yeah. Their brand wasn't about being the cheapest or having the most flights.
That was about making flying enjoyable, even cool.
Right. And they wove that into every single detail. From the mood lighting to the friendly staff, it was all part of that experience. So as we wrap up our deep dive into David Rusenko's insights, I think the big takeaway is this. Success is rarely overnight. It takes grit, determination, and a willingness to navigate uncertainty.
Obsess over your customers, not your competitors. Prioritize learning above all else, and when it finally clicks, you'll know. It's not just a metric, it's a feeling.
Shouldn't have said it better myself. So as you continue on your own product journey, remember Rusenko's words. What hidden need are you uncovering? How does your product make people feel? Those are the questions that will guide you to that magical space where your vision aligns with what the world needs.
And on that note, we'll wrap up today's deep dive. Until next time.